Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Finance Review Group. The induction loop is now operative. Members and officers, please remember to switch microphones on and, most importantly, speak directly into the microphone and switch off after speaking. The meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public, and a recording of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Any exempt private items on the agenda, the live stream will cease prior to the meeting moving into private, and this will involve a short delay. Thank you very much. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillors Ahmed and Councillor Masood.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the last meeting. I presume everybody who was here at that meeting has looked, and can I take them as read? Yes. Okay, thank you. Disclosure of interests. If we come across any item or discussion which involves either private items or items connected with people, we will just need to be reminded. Urgent business?
None, Chair.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 92.
None, Chair.
Those items on the agenda affected by Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992 will be identified at the meeting. Any member so affected is reminded that he or she should disclose the fact and refrain from voting on those items. We've got no urgent business. References from other committees and bodies?
Again, none, Chair.
Thank you very much. I've made my announcements. That's me finished. So, first report, finance update. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Chair. So, what members have in front of them is on page 12 and 13. This is the first quarterly monitoring for this current financial year for 2022-2023. So this is both the revenue and capital monitoring, including schools and HRA as well. So I'll take members through the report, and then I will be happy to take any questions. So the first paragraph talks about what is the recommendation. This report was discussed at executive meeting, and the first paragraph you will see it says there's a significant focus over a spend of in the region of 10 million. Now the main reason for this I will go through in the table later on the next page, but I'll have to point out, you will see in executive recommendation 1, Roman letters 1 and E, we did set aside 5 million of one-off contingency towards meeting inflationary pressures, and out of this 2.4 has been declared so far, and there's still 2.6 million to deal any further inflationary pressures, but I will touch on that. Then the paragraph 2, which I will go through, so Roman letters to talk about HRA as well, over a spend of 1.3, and then the schools budget as well. So what this is showing that because when we prepared the budget back in February, the assumptions was based on an inflation of roughly 2%, and that was OBR forecast. At that time, we are coming out of the pandemic and things were looking better, and OBR was saying things really start to settle, and inflation was 2%. But after March, April, when it started to hit those crises, then all these assumptions which were used both from central government and from local government, it's completely down. Inflation are hitting roughly 9-10%. So all these are feeding into the system, and the forecast which you've got in front of you is forecast that inflation which will be with us this year, next year, and how this feeds into our forecast, and those are things. So you've got things like pay award, pay inflation, price inflation, fuel, I'm sure everybody's aware. So everything, when inflation hits, it feeds into the whole process. So that's one of the things which you will see. And the other thing is, just to put a summary, just to put it in context, the assumption was when we're coming out of the pandemic, things will start to improve, income will start to improve, demand might start to reduce. So there was quite an optimistic view at that time because coming out of the pandemic. But now things are going a bit backward, and that's why now the forecast, not only in terms of the income and the cost, is moving on the wrong direction. And this is something which all local government, not only local government, families and central government, everybody has to face this challenge. Inflation is one of the biggest challenge we are currently facing. So the background is just paragraph 2. It's extremely difficult, combined with high level of demand for services and the delivery of savings, now supplemented by acute rise in price inflation and expected pay pressures. So we know these are into the system, and that's why we are revising our forecast, and it's going to be a challenge for the council as any other council. You will see on page 14, on top of that, we did set aside 5 million as one-off risk to cover things like unexpected pressures, price inflation, and to meet ongoing impact on coronavirus. This is when we did the outturn, which was presented in June. In the outturn, by that time, we knew there is a big pressure in terms of inflation, price, and pay, so we did set aside 5 million. Now, our expectation is, you will see in the table, there's still 2.6, but our expectation is those inflation will start to feed into the system as we go along. So we're keeping 2.6 to cover any additional inflationary pay and price pressures which we will encounter in the rest of this year. You will see in one paragraph we talk about recent figures produced by LGA project that 2.4 billion of resulting cost pressures on local authority services for the current year, which means this year, and rising to 3.6 billion in subsequent years. So as long as we don't bring inflation under control, we means as a country, then that extra funding which is required, and no additional funding is expected from government, and that was announced by the Secretary of State. So it's a difficult situation, and that's why we're bringing this report to say, okay, what we are going to. So we'll discuss about some of the mitigation and recovery plan which is covered in this report. I think the table on page 15 paint the picture. So you will see the 10 million which we've reported is on the bottom line on the last column, but you will see if you go down the 6 or 7 line, just the employee pay award is 4 million. So it's 3.885 because we set aside an assumption of 2%, and there has been an offer from employers in the region of 6%. Now that has not been agreed, so that's what we are basing our estimate on. So only 4 million of that is just pay award. So those pressures, as I've mentioned, there are pressures in the demand and the pressures on income, because rather than the expectation was things will start to improve, but things are going on the other side because of the slowing down of the economy, because of inflation. So all the assumptions which we think that we will start to make good progress, it's a setback for in terms of our impact on the budget. Now, the main areas you will see, paragraph 8 talks about inflation, pay, and coronavirus impact, and that's in itself, you will see said we've made a provision, but I think those are already, we've declared around 2.4, and then we'll be declaring another 2.6 million in order to be absorbed by those. And this is not only for the price, but the coronavirus impact. And the assumption in the budget we've made that because when we are coming out of coronavirus, all the support we are getting from central government is no longer available, but coronavirus still has its impacts. So we did provide from some one-off, but now with the inflation and everything, whether that impact will carry on, and our assumption is probably yes. There is savings program of delivery of 5 million in this budget, but that as well some early indication sign in terms of, because the pressures are building up, and then the amount of work which needs to be done in terms of recovery. So you'll have to keep an eye on those savings and to make sure that those savings are delivered. And page 16 onwards talk a little bit more in terms of the departmental. So if you look at chief exec, the big one is the second bullet point. and it's still linked with reduced fee income from summons cost and enforcement activity. And that's why court being closed, but now with the economy slowing down, recovery of income can be a bit more of a challenge. I think in children's services, there is a net overspend of 0.7, but we know that the council has put significant amount of funding into children's services to stabilize children's services. So then the main area where we've got a significant overspend is inclusive economy, and the further bullet won't explain, but the one which is property and infrastructure is 3.3 million roughly, and those are because of commercial properties. There's preservation house, which you reported before, and the other areas such as highways and street lighting, and that's due to gas and electricity prices. So some of them we've set aside one-off funding. So, but here you're looking at a gross figure, but some of them we did set aside. Then neighborhood services, 1.6, and this is the big area is on the street parking income. So you will see there's a lot of like revenues, income, highways in terms of lightning, increasing cost, inflation cost, and fees and charges like parking income. So there is quite a lot of these is as a result of what I said when we prepared the budget in February. Now things are moving on the other direction. I think sustainable development on the next page, 1.8, and the biggest here is the special education needs transport. And that as was an area where officers are working on to take an overall council-wide approach in terms of how we are going to deal with the special education needs transport, which is quite important and critical for vulnerable children. But at the same time, we are looking at ways how we can make best use of our resources. So some of these we have been reporting over the last year, but in the outturn, when we prepared the budget, there was an expectation when things is going to improve, when you're getting out of a pandemic, economy might start to, so those pressures should come down. So income should go up and demand should come down, but it's moving on the other direction since the impact of inflation. I think the population and well-being on page 19, 1.7, and this is the main area is housing, 1.6 million. And that's in terms of homelessness. And here again, the whole idea was when you're coming out of the pandemic, things will improve. But right now, with recession, with the economy slowing down, with inflation, those are the pressures which, as a council, we've got to manage. So officers are very much aware. That's why we try to bring these figures ASAP so that we take corrective measures. So for borrowing costs is another area we'll be looking at our capital expenditure. So right now we are not forecasting any significant variation of borrowing costs, but in the Q2 we'll be looking at all our capital expenditure and see whether there is an expenditure which we can reprofile, and that will feed into a positive in terms of borrowing. So that might help us to balance this year's budget. I think one point I would make is we do set aside the general contingency. So the specific contingency, which in the years we had transition, that's all gone now. But we do keep in the region of 2 million. But because of the variance, which is quite high, we've already applied that 2 point. So there's no more contingency left, other than that one-off contingency in inflation and the 5 million, which is set aside. I think the next paragraph, which is next paragraph 5, talk about further costs during 22-23 and cumulative impact in 23-24. So we are giving a view of 23-24 as well, because we're in the middle of preparation of the budget. So the biggest one is staff pay award. So if you look at pay award over 2 years, i.e. 22-23 and 23-24, because the assumption was 23-24 2.25, but right now, if it's in the region of 6%, so just pay award is in the region of 8 million over 2 years. And if you look price inflation, another 4-5 million, straight away we're talking about 13 million. That's without taking into account impact of inflation on income, on household cost of living, impact of us recovering our income or council tax collection, and budget pressures in terms of demand going up. So just those two items, because of price and pay inflation, we're talking about 13-14 million. And these are the things which is hard cash, and we know because we're already dealing with some claim in terms of inflation on fuel. And that's a bit summarizes in paragraph Roman letters 3, the cumulative pressures we're talking about that could add up to 22 if nothing is done. So that's why we have to take measures in order to address those as soon as possible. And just touch on other funds, public health. The forecast is 140, but public health is a ring fence budget, so we'll have to make sure the budget pressure there as well is contained within the budget. And HRA, which normally there was a surplus, which we budgeted for 2.7, but the net overspend is 1.3, and it talks about repairs and maintenance and all these costs going up. So inflation cut across any general fund, whether it's schools, whether traded services, whether it's HRA. So that's one of the things which is quite has a significant impact across every services. Paragraph 7 talks about recovery plan. So there is a list of things which we'll have to do. And then the reason why we have to put these recovery measures ASAP, because the sooner we control the budget pressure, then it will try to reduce the gap which you have in the current year and help us to deliver balanced budget, which is going to be a big challenge. And then it'll put us in a good place in order to have 23-24 budget, because with the inflation 23-24 budget, there were further pressures, which was not budgeted for or anticipated when we put the medium-term financial plan. And as I said, over 2 years, just two items, just pay award and price, or just fuel, it's in the region of 13-14 million. And now when social care and everything we have, then yeah. So I think it's a challenge. I think everybody's facing this challenge, is household income, local government, charitable organizations, central government. It's the big challenge, and inflation is one of the big things which is on everybody's mind. I see coronavirus, there's just we put there, but there's not much money. There is an element which was left in last year's, but that was a specific grant which will be spent this year. So that won't bring an upside in the budget. Capital monitoring is early stage, the first quarter, but that is showing there is sort of a focus on the spend, but we'll fine tune that. And in light of the budget pressure, we're looking each line of the capital budget to see whether anything which we need to postpone or need to cancel or need to reprofile. So capital is an area which you have to look at, but at the same time, some of the program is important to deliver the council objective. Some of the program is important to deliver the transformation. Some of the program are important for the service delivery, but that is being. So we are looking at every line of the budget. So that's, Chair, bring me back to some of the main risks on paragraph 14. So delivering the balanced budget, not only for 22, 23, 2024, the managing in cost pressure, the price inflation, pay cost, price inflation, and the development and impact from coronavirus, particularly reduced income level, because that is still something which is dropping, but with the slowdown of the economy, that might go up. So that brings me to the recommendation, Chair, which was agreed by executive, and it's on page 13. So I'm quite happy to take any questions, Chair. But as I said, it's a challenge, but it's a challenge for when I speak to my colleagues or the Chief Finance Officer, it is a challenge we have highlighted to deluxe.
Thank you for a very succinct report. It doesn't sound too hopeful, but I'm sure things will hopefully get a little better. Anyway, David Franks.
Thank you, John. I think I ought to say right at the beginning that my questions, and I haven't got loads, but I've got a few. They do relate to the basis of the budget in the first place. So in essence, I'm saying they're directed really at Councillor Roche and not at Dev Gopal. Well, I make no apology for that, Rob. The fact is, it's your budget. You voted for it. Dev Gopal didn't. So that's anyway. That's where we're coming from. Now, whether you choose to answer the questions or let Dev do it for you is your choice. And frankly, I'm quite happy to take answers from Dev, because he has proved over the years that he actually knows what he's talking about. But he can't answer political questions. I think I'd like to start with the staff salary increase. We had this debate at the Fire Authority when the officers started suggesting a 2% should be built into the budget. All of the members of all parties agreed instantly that 2% was not realistic, that we needed to put something more realistic in the budget. They ended up putting 4% in, and it looks as though that might not be enough either. But I'm told that the overall effect of the current flat rate offer is about 6% on the council's total payroll. So why on earth did you put 2% in the budget? You can't believe that that was realistic, surely.
I can answer that. When we prepare the budget, that's we're talking about October, November time. The budget gets approved in full council in February, but the budget more or less finalized in November, December time. And November, December time, that's when we've got the spending review, we had the finance settlement, we've got OBR prediction. And OBR prediction was that inflation will be around 2%. So when we prepared the budget back in November, December, and it goes to the first executive, second executive, so budget gets balanced by November time. That 2% was what was in OBR forecast. The 6% was agreed, but this is in light of what happened after the February budget. So that's why the negotiation which is taking place is more to take into account that inflation is high. So we started to have that discussion with government officers back in April, May, when things were starting to, So there was an acknowledgement, and it stays an acknowledgement that the OBR prediction was not correct. So we all, as council, will base on what was agreed as part of the finance settlement. And the finance settlement as well, the amount of money which was provided to local government was based that inflation will be back to the 2%. So when we get the finance settlement, the amount of money which we receive from central government, plus the amount government allowed council to increase council tax, now precept is for the social care, was in the region of 2%. So all the indication was that we can increase our income, our council tax, and the grant coming from central government is using the benchmark of 2%. So based on those constraints, the provision which had to make in the budget was 2%. But the point you're making, Councillor Frank, the 6% is something which has been announced only 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that takes into account the current economic climate rather than the assumption at that time. So that was the assumption which we used at that time, which you're right, has proven to be not. Because the budget is as good as the assumptions which we used.
But no, it doesn't really. Central Beds decided way back in February when they were doing their budget that 2% was not a sensible figure to put in the budget. The Fire Authority decided the same. What was the reason, what was the rationale behind a decision to put in a figure? Did you really believe that after several years of effective reductions in staff salaries, which is what they've faced, did you really believe that 2% was going to deal with the problem?
I think, as I say, the budget is always, after the event, we can look at those assumptions. It's as good as those assumptions. I think the 6%. I think no. I don't know, but not a single council probably have budgeted 6%. That would have been. Some councils probably they budget a bit more, but most of the councils, when we look at, they budgeted at 2%. But at that time, I believe was at 2%, but because negotiation was taking place, we didn't want to preempt what that figure looks like. So if I can answer your question, if 2% was an assumption, if there was, because 1% is roughly £1 million. So if you look at the budget, there was a contingency of 2.2 million. So even if you budget 2%, and if it's normal circumstances, if ended around 3%, we could have funded this from contingency. So did I make some allowance in order to have a pay award more than 2%? Yes, it was done for contingency, because the assumption was to use what government was prepared to give in terms of settlement and in terms of council tax. Did I provide some additional headroom in the budget? That was for the contingency. So if we end up in normal circumstances, even if the pay was, if we didn't have this high level of inflation, 3%, there was a contingency of 2 million there. So I think the budget overall, without knowing what inflation will hit 10%, it was reasonable. So I would say 2% plus there was 2 million contingency. So whether it was some additional pressures or some pay award, so there was some allowance, Councillor Frank, but we stick to that OBR forecast of 2%.
Okay, let's move on. At the top of page 16, there is reference to 9 savings projects that are currently expected to have shortfalls. First of all, what's the extent of the shortfall? Is it just over 1 million figure included in the next line?
This we are currently reviewing, as I've mentioned in my summary. Right now, the difficult time. So when you're getting economy slowing down, the demand will go up. And then if you're forecasting more income in terms of generating additional income, that will come under pressure. By the time we're preparing the report, the assessment coming from department was there is a £1 million pressure. Now, when we are going to review, we are going to review on a monthly basis. And if that pressure goes up, then it will open up the gap. But what officers are working is to make sure that we deliver those savings, because it's absolutely critical. But it's going to be a challenge, because we know when the economy is slowing down, then it becomes more of a challenge, because you've got on one hand deal with other demand pressures, generate more income. When the economy is slowing down, then it becomes a challenge. But officers are working towards delivering those.
Okay, I'll take that as a sort of yes. We've a report later, which we're going to take in secret, on the savings programme that the council is pursuing. Why, please, doesn't it include some information about these 9 projects which are not going to achieve that target?
I think the report which you said we are going to discuss about savings, I'm not aware of that report, councillors, you can remind me. But in terms of savings target, you will see in the volatile budget, there are areas where you're saying amber, red, or green. So maybe it's not directly comparable, but you will see on page 34, 35, 36, we do highlight those areas where we're flagging at this stage as red. So I can go back and give you a breakdown of the 9 projects, but most of these will be highlighted starting from page savings monitoring phase targets from page 30 onwards. So we do highlight those areas where we are saying red, and it is highlighted on those pages. But if you would like me to give you a detail of those 9 projects which come to the, I'm quite happy to email it to you. But on the volatile budget, it's highlighted the red. There's quite few on red, and the explanation is provided there.
Yep, thank you. I have got a couple of questions when we get to those pages. Third bullet point down in paragraph 4, 274,000 shortfall in recovery of aged debt. It's incredible that the report actually states that this primarily results from an overstated income target in the budget. Who agreed a budget that was with a figure that wasn't achievable? I mean, is this another example of the sloppy and over-optimistic budgeting?
This one was an oversight from officers. So normally when we set income target, we say here's a gross income, and then there's an element which the department will keep because of recovering those debt. So this is an oversight. Rather than including the net as a savings, the gross figure was included as the savings. So it was an oversight from officers. So it was something which we have to correct that.
Okay, move on. Bottom of page 17, again in paragraph C, there's £107,000 of software development costs for updating the payroll system. Was that included in the budget?
Now, the software development costs for iTrend payroll system, there is a project. So right now, this is declared as an overspend, but any software costs which were including in iTrend, there's an expectation that this will deliver savings. So we have not yet captured the savings. So to be on the cautious side, we've included those as additional spend on payroll, but there's a transformation program based on iTrend, which if you're using more electronic things, it will help transformation. It will help increase in the time, which will reduce the time we'll take in terms of recruitment. So there was a report which came to exec, and when we start to capture the savings delivered through that upgrading that iTrend payroll system, will capture those savings, and hopefully that saving should cover those costs.
Okay, another bit of sloppy budgeting. Then the fourth item in that list is £194,000 reduced income from the contingent labour joint venture. It's been the council's ambition for years and years and years to reduce the spend on agency staff, which you these days call contingency labour. Don't know whether that makes it sound better or not. Did it not occur to you that if you're going to buy less agency labour from the joint venture, that might somehow reduce the income of the joint venture and therefore reduce the council's benefit from it?
I think this item is in the first couple of years. So first year when you start the joint venture, normally those joint venture have some one-off cost. But the latest figures we have is the joint venture from Connect to Luton has gone into profit now, and will recover those sort of loss and it turn into profit now. So you will see in 23-24 budget when we're preparing, we'll recover all those losses and will start to deliver a surplus and a dividend to the council. But that was mainly because of one-off costs at that time.
Okay, let's go over the page. Page 18, the top of the page, Preservation House. Preservation House was bought in order for eventually for it to be demolished to make way for a project which may never happen. At the time it was bought, the lease was bought, there was talk about possibly buying the freehold. Is buying the freehold still a consideration? Would that save the considerable amount of money the council is paying in rent, having only bought the lease?
I think the preservation house, we're looking at all the options. But just at this stage, if we buy those freehold, that come at a cost. So we've got to borrow. So we have to factor the cost of those borrowing and cost of servicing that debt. So last time when you look at it, it didn't stack up. So that's why we're already paying for the rent. But if you buy those, there's an element of borrowing. So we'll review that. If the market starts to improve, then there might be a case to say, because buying is we're going to have a long term, but this is the lease. If the lease finishes, then we might stop incurring those losses. But if you buy it, then you're in for the long term. If you don't have a tenant over the long term, then we might make savings in the earlier years, but in later years, you might not if you don't have a long-term tenant. So it's an option which we've considered and we look at it, but based on those options appraisal, I think buying it outright and incurring additional borrowing and interest, that was a risky option. But we'll review that, Councillor Frank. We'll look at it as part of 23-24. it is an option which we keep on reviewing.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I understand that answer. Are you saying that you're now taking a realistic view that the project for which Preservation House was bought may not happen, given that if the project does happen, that the building will need to be demolished, and you can't do that without the consent of the freeholder, I'm sure.
So I think just picking up from the point you just made, and earlier you said Preservation House was linked with St. Park Access Road. Now, St. Park Access Road, the council is still working on the project, and there are other bid which there are with DFT, which we are working with. So the pot of money where if we are successful, then that project will have to be sort of revisited. But at this stage, if we are to incur any additional borrowing, that should be as an investment property. And that's what we've said is whether we are going to buy additional investment property in our portfolio. But if you're successful with the bid which we are working, and if we get more money from DFT, or there was at some point discussion whether there's a case to apply for additional LUF money. So there might be other money available in the near future. So this is a project which is on the council agenda because it delivers so linked with the enterprise zone, which is quite an area where jobs creation and everything. So that's critical in delivering the council 2040 vision. So officers are working on whether there is other pot of money available in order to deliver that project to deliver. But at this stage, no, we haven't secured any additional funding. So that's what officers are working on.
Okay, I'm having some difficulty getting the 2040 vision lined up with whether or not you buy the freeholder Presentation House. But anyway, let's move down the list then. Item 9 in the same list, unachievable income target of £158,000 relating to Century Park Access Road project. It's been 3 years at least since this scrutiny committee rubbished the business case for the access road and sent 3 pages of reasons why the business case simply didn't stand up. It's become increasingly clear ever since then that the project was certainly not going to be going ahead in its originally conceived form, and it's now even been taken off the council's capital programme. So why are you still budgeting for income from it?
Okay, so just to respond to that, I think Century Park Access Road was a project when it started, there was significant grant funding which were ring-fenced from SEMLEP. So there was some discussion where DFT decided not to allocate that funding because of the time it was taking to build that project. So when the funding was pulled out and we didn't qualify for that funding, that's where the business case had to be revisited. Now, coming back on your specific point on 9, again, we're taking a cautious approach here about the income target, but my understanding is, and Nicola can correct me if I'm wrong, those staff who have been working on Century Park Access Road project are working on the LUF bit. So the LUF bit, we've got a capital allocation, and there is an element of that LUF bid where we can use toward the cost of this stuff. So that Century Park unachievable target of 158 million, that's when we are going to use the LUF allocation. Those allocation will go to meet part of this unachievable income target. But that's my expectation. So and that's the bit which we'll have to go back and check. No. Okay.
So you're still expecting to get £158,000 a year from a project that isn't going to happen and has been taken off the capital programme. Unrealistic budgeting. Let's move on. Over the page, at the bottom of page 20, paragraph E, corporate budgets, talks about borrowing costs. Can you tell me, please, the 550 million or thereabouts unsecured loans to the airport company, do the loan agreements provide for variable interest rates? We're talking here about the 550 or thereabouts million pounds unsecured loans to the airport company. Do the loan agreements provide for a variable interest rate? Given that Public Works Loans Board rates are inevitably going to go up and probably go up some more, does that mean you can increase the rates you're charging the airport company?
Okay.
Can I just interrupt there? It's not, should we do this in private later, or is it going to be, because it mentions the finances of the...
I think the rate is in our treasury report, so
Okay,
I will be quite general, not a specific. The principle of fixed and variable. Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah. But that's a good point here, because we are talking about LAL here, but it's in our treasury. First, in terms of, I know, Councillor Frank, we had this debate quite a while. The loan is secured by the LAL assets. Now, whether LAL is a wholly owned subsidiary, but LAL is still a separate legal entity. So all these loan and the debentures has been registered, and they're registered with Company House as well. So that's just to make sure we are providing secured loan. The question about interest rate, what we try to do, most if not all of these loan, it's fixed already. So PWB loan is going up, the bulk of the loan we've already secured at fixed rate from PWLB. There might be tail end of the loan because of the DART project and some of the DCO project, but significant has already been fixed. So if rate goes up, the gilt is going up, the base rate is going up, the rate at which we borrow, it's already fixed. And the rate at which we lend LAL, in order to provide certainty to that project, that rate has been fixed as well. So to de-risk our investment, to de-risk the impact on the council revenue budget, those rates have been fixed. Now, lately the rate has gone up a little bit, but just last 3 weeks ago, we checked the gilt rate on a daily basis. It went down closer to the 2%, and we fixed 50 million. So that's within the budget allowance. So right now, the risk of PWE going up, don't expect to have significant impact on the budget, because we do provide an allowance for the rates going up. So answer to your question, rate fixed, might be a little element. The rate at which we lend LAL has been fixed. So both certainty to LAL and certainty to LBC in terms of the budgeting.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you. And just as an aside, we keep on being told that the loans are secured on the assets of the company. Given that the airport, that the council actually owns the company, it therefore already owns the assets. So effectively, the loans are not secured. You can't secure a loan on an asset that you already own. Can we move over to page 30 now, which is your savings monitoring, which you referred to earlier? The second one up from the bottom, which is a review of third and fourth tier structures. It says not yet achieved proposals need to be developed for achieving the saving. That surely is saying that saving was included in the budget, even though you had no idea about how you're going to achieve it.
I think on this one, I think we'll have to put it in context here. And you will see in the budget of the delivering roughly sort of 160 million of savings over the years, I think we have to acknowledge delivering more savings is a challenge. So officers will work on bringing proposals in front of the council, but there are certain proposals where can be a challenge. So sometimes we say we'll try to deliver in 2023, but it might take longer to deliver. So there are certain areas, yes, and that's one of the reasons where we try to use contingency as much as possible, but then we had 2 million of contingency in the general contingency to take into account if there's any shortfall in terms of budget savings delivery. So at this stage is amber, so officers are working towards delivering those savings. But yeah, if you go for the savings, yes, there are certain elements which are red and amber, and that takes into account the current economic climate we are in. But one of the points which I would like to make here is of the last 3-4 years in the budget, out of 38 million of savings, the council has already delivered 30 million. So it's getting harder. It's getting harder not to only find savings, but it's getting harder to deliver. So we try to push hard and try to deliver those savings, but yes, some of them are proving to be slightly difficult, and that's what we'll be working on, and to see whether there are alternative savings which we can find.
Okay, page 32, then the bottom one. We're back to recruitment service, contingent labour, agency staff again, effectively. A 22-23 target of £192,000 with a variation of £192,000, which means you're not going to get any of it. The final column at the right-hand side of the page, which shows the 23-24 savings target, is empty. So can we assume that you've given up all hope of ever achieving that £192,000 saving?
Okay, so this relates to the earlier point, but one the point you've made, Councillor Frank, is you will see by successfully reducing reliance on agency staff, the council has made savings. So working with Connect to Luton and reducing the staff, and there's a lot of staff is we are having staff which we are direct fill. So Connect to Luton, if they are doing well, the council is making all those savings. So we should acknowledge that there is a savings in the council budget. In terms of 192 I've mentioned, you're looking at 23-24 budget, those losses have been recovered. And when we're looking at the figures, there will be a dividend to be declared in 23-24. So that dividend is after recovering those losses which were in earlier years. Any company in the first couple of years, does take time to settle, and it takes time to recover the initial preliminary and pre-incorporation expenses. But that company is doing well. In fact, they were shortlisted for LG award. Yeah, so Nicola would like to come here.
Yes. So in terms of Connect to Luton, they've only been running for 18 months, and the setup costs, the sort of capital setup costs, and all of the costs of setting up have been, and the loan to the shareholders have all been paid back. So in terms of, Deb's quite right, they're on track to produce a dividend back to the local authority in 22-23, and with a bigger projection in 23-24. But we can bring a separate note back to members if you. We feed a Connect to Luton feed into the shareholder group. But if members want a fuller kind of report back around Connect to Luton, more than happy to do that, because I think from a group Luton perspective, a company perspective, I think they're doing quite well as a startup that started up during COVID and is kind of dealing with the complexities of the contingent labour market in a Luton context.
Okay, thank you. That will do from me. Thank you very much, Chair, for the moment. I'd like to make a comment later.
Thank you, Chair. Go back to page 17 and small c. Now, Councillor Franks has already asked part one of my question, so skip over that. Sorry. When we're talking about the software of upgrading the iTrent payroll, is that still with iTrent, or are we changing the payroll system to somebody else?
Still iTrent.
Still
but
iTrent.
The latest is the cloud solutions and more functionality.
That's fine. It's just the civil service binned iTrent and went to Oracle, and I would urge you not to even consider them. But that's personal opinion, having to work with it on a daily basis. So page 19, sustainable development the 1.5 million overspend on special educational needs transport. It says, and cost increase from providers. Do we have any in-house special needs transport, or is it all now provided externally?
I think it's in-house. There's
Shall I
some.
come in here? Sorry, yeah, I can provide perhaps a fuller answer and get a more complete written answer. So we, in terms of the passenger transport unit, the PTU, we provide, I would say, probably at least 60% of the transport ourselves, but because of demand, we've had to contract out as well. So we've got, you know, a fleet of buses. You will see them on the streets of Luton, and it's a big fleet, well over 100 buses. But we do, because of demand, have to contract out as well.
Yeah, no, that's what, because I live not far from the extension to, not really to you, Richmond Hill, and I see the buses come up there. So, and we would, you know, assured when it was that it would be provided, transport would be provided rather than individuals coming in. But I just wanted to know how much. So it's.
I'll give you the exact ratio. We can come back with her, but I think it's around 2/3, 1/3. We do the vast majority as the local authority.
That's fine. Thank you. Page 21. Scope for further costs. Talk in 5.2 of the June increase of 9.2% and an RPI of 11.8. Inflation was announced today to be 10.1. Bank of England, when it put the base rate up to 1.5%, was forecasting a potential of 13% inflation for the year. What rate of inflation? What's the high when you say lowest cost, mid cost? Because it just goes straight over the page. Sorry, and highest cost. What rate of inflation was used to come up with those figures?
I think what we did some early work, because inflation is very difficult to so what we did, we didn't use one single line of inflation. So we asked each department, and we split our total spend on goods and services into things like transport, things like social care and everything. And we use a wide range of best case, worst case. So sometimes there are areas where inflation linked with fuel cost is higher. Some of them linked with food or things might be slightly lower. So we use a combination of lot of department and a lot of scenario to come up with these figures. So in terms of the mid cost, you will see is 5.3. So as I said, we've set aside some one-off contingency, but whether this contingency will be enough, we just have to wait and see. One of the things which we've already agreed some of the contract, so those are contractual already agreed, but some of this inflation might not feed into this year's, because in the same way government has already agreed to council tax goes up by 2%, and our settlement was based on the similar figures. So we've already agreed with the supplier market, but this will definitely feed into 23-24. But we'll have to review. Right now, we are working with the supplier and with everybody to say how we can manage that inflation, because we know that inflation can feed inflation. You can start to settle a lot of, and then it will increase prices, and prices will increase wages, and it might have this parallel circle. So we as well are trying to say where we can control, where we can manage, just to contain that inflation, because any more increase in the budget will increase the gap and will end up making more savings. So it's a difficult balance, But we didn't do just 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 9. We graded into each individual area and tried to have a much more better understanding. But that figure, I'm sure in Q2 will be wrong, because it's very difficult to predict. But we had a high level estimate on those figures.
Okay. Page 22. School budgets. biggest concern, which has obviously been highlighted on various news sites and of schools looking at reducing to 3-day weeks. Have we had any indication from any of the Luton schools if they are considering having to do that in order to protect their budgets?
Saying 3-day week.
3-day week, i.e. not teaching 2 days a week. So the students won't be in for 2 days. Yeah.
Yeah. But right now, I would.
I mean, this has only been on national news that schools are looking at the possibilities. Yeah. So. The way it depends on which report you read, in which website or news channel, but it looks to me like they're talking about 3 days a week, and because staff would still have to be in the school for the other 2 days to provide online, because they're not allowed to do it from their home. So I'm working on the assumption that they're talking about not using any sort of electricity and gas and what have you in the schools for 2 days a week, which means there would be no classes available for 2 days a week. That's my reading of what I've seen of the reports, and I'm just interested to know whether any Luton schools have indicated that they might be in the position to have to think about that. I mean, it's not directly something to do with Luton's budget, but because we get that budget money directly from and then handed out, it's worrying that if that, given the kids haven't had much in the way of proper education because of COVID, and then they're talking about potential 3-day week, it's not going to be good for specifically those that have just not had any education for that period. Additional time lost because the schools simply can't afford to heat and light and run the computers is not a good thing for a allegedly first world country. No.
That somebody sits on one of the largest school governing bodies. Schools have not even considered that possibility from attending the governors and the schools forum, anything like that at this stage. So, using these sort of scare tactics and putting fear in parents' mind, I don't think, unless we have some sort of a actual thing that we know and aware that the schools are considering, it would be totally irresponsible for us to start starting a rumor. I think it would be not fair because parents are already worried about the inflationary cost and the cost to the children's food and all that. I think it would be irresponsible at this stage. Luton schools, as far as I'm aware, and from the governor's point of view, are not considered anything like that.
No, just one more on to page. Well, it's the savings monitoring. Of the 39 savings targets, 28 are in amber or red. So nearly 2/3 of the identified savings are at risk. How much of the additional contingency that you've put in would be eaten up if all 28 amber and red savings were not met?
I think answer to your question, Councillor, it is a challenge at this stage. So the early indication we are saying red or amber, but the red or amber doesn't necessarily mean that the savings won't be delivered. There might be timing issue here. So some of them, if it's red, it might be definitely, it's not deliverable, but bulk of those is a timing issue here to say, okay, it might not be delivered this year, but it will be delivered next year. So I can go and do a detailed analysis here to say, and we are going to do it for 23-24 budget anyway. So some of them, it's more to reflect that it's getting harder in terms of, as I said, when you prepare the budget, things were getting better, things were getting back to normal. As we are getting back into slowing down the economy and inflation, things getting worse, then delivery of savings can become a challenge. But we are meeting tomorrow, and constantly officers are discussing, but this will be absolutely monitoring. But in terms of coming back to your point you've made, whether there is contingency, yes, we had around 2.3 million of general contingency, and my response to Councillor Frank is just a pay award will take the whole contingency. So that was not planned, the pay award and inflation. So there was 2 million if those savings were maybe delaying in delivering those savings. So there was a pot of money there. But inflation has turned the whole assumptions quite upside down. So it's going to be a challenge, but I think we are working towards how we address those challenges. And yeah, it is going to be a challenge. If I say here, no, everything is in the bag and everything, yeah, because the economic conditions won't allow the same rigors, the same amount of time to spend in delivering those savings, because there are other things which is preoccupying officers' mind. But we've got to start to work on those and see whether, if we don't deliver, and the things is to have sort of compensating savings. But it is going to be a challenge, yeah, to be frank.
So, can I ask you, in terms of the staffing and agency cost, I think in the last few years we have set up a number of targets to achieve, but since the COVID and other things, is it not the case that the staffing mainly is due to, because we are finding it more difficult in almost, particularly in social care, as well as the social workers, as well as the even some of the other parts of the council, where is a huge difficulty, and to provide those services to the most vulnerable people, we need to have an agency staff.
I think the answer to your question, yes. It's becoming difficult to recruit. Recruitment is becoming more difficult. You see, Heathrow can't even run a full service because the shortage in terms of staff. So it's not just for public sector, private sector. I don't know where all those staff who are working has gone. So I always still probably people took early retirement or people are planning to work until, yeah. And I'm facing that even in finance and revenue and Ben. So it's becoming difficult, not in just finance or social care, in private sector, and even the audit firm, they're struggling to recruit staff. So recruitment of staff is a challenge. The reliance on agency staff, as we mentioned, in terms of Connect to Luton, we've reduced that reliance. So the number of cost of agency staff was going down. Whether because of the slowing down the economy, whether we'll be more successful in recruiting staff, I think what we are more concentrating is to grow our own, to train our own staff. There was an sort of social care, there was an academy which was set up in order to train our own staff. In finance, we are trying to recruit and helping those staff to develop within the finance so that we can place them in posts where they're vacant. So it is a challenge. it's not just across. Any department will see, and recruiting staff, especially some of the technical staff, social care, it is a challenge. So the long-term aim is to reduce agency staff, have permanent staff, but in the short term, yeah, it is proving to be a challenge. But the long-term aim of the council is less reliance of agency staff. So we're trying everything, but current economic climate is coming out of pandemic is proving that recruiting good staff and in the technical areas, it is being a challenge. Yeah.
Can I ask you in terms of the cost in wages and prediction in terms of the inflation, being in February situation, I don't think many people had realized, even the top economists in the country, that the inflation and the cost would go up as high as it has. I think if anybody in this room can predict that, they should be sitting in the monetary policy at Bank of England. So isn't it difficult for anyone to be able to work that, and setting a target was just an assumption, and it's not, because it's a sloppy budget, is it?
It is absolutely right. I've mentioned is at that point the best information was things coming from the Bank of England, things coming from OBR. If the Bank of England and OBR got it wrong, so let alone this, as I said, yeah, we follow some. They've got a lot of models to predict. So we try to follow what the Bank of England and OBR predictions are. We all got it wrong. If somebody says inflation will be, then I said probably, yeah, if I can predict that, I'll be working in the city council, was saying, and probably I'll be making a lot of predictions, which is, yeah, but no, I haven't got that luck. No.
Can I ask you, in terms of the joint venture, is it not the case that you are putting a lot of investment in the first place, and then the actual income comes much later? It doesn't come in immediately if you're expecting something coming in at the very first stage. Is that, or have I got that wrong?
You mean in children's services?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is as a result of the inspection. So quite rightly, children is an area which is top in council priority. So you will see over the years we've put close to 10 or more. That's how much money which council has put in that. And you're right, when you turn around the corner, you come out of inspection and you become sort of a good service, then we should expect the cost to start to come down. But then the other challenge we are facing, and that's the point I've made at the beginning, is on one hand, we can make progress to improve the service and to become a good service. But on the other hand, because of the impact of the slowing down of economy, of inflation, you might end up having more children which will have to take in care. So that's the bit which is the biggest uncertainty here, because having a slowing down economy, people are squeezed on their budget, that's in itself create additional demographic pressures. And that's the one which is we have to keep an eye. But the point you made, yeah, if you invest, then that invest should generate a return in terms of lower costs going forward.
My last one on this, and I've got a comment to make perhaps towards the end. Can I ask you, in some of the services, there is an increase, particularly in the special needs. There's about 40% increase. Also, in terms of the services in the adult social care, there is a more and more complex cases of adults that need more complex needs. So that really is very difficult for any local authority in the country to be able to have a even 50% right prediction. So isn't those costs, that we do put a contingency, particularly in children's services, but that always tends to be, underestimated, because somehow you have no idea how many children are going to come into care. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I think absolutely, Councillor Hussain. talking about what the biggest challenge we are facing, I said inflation, top. But there's another one which is equally as top as inflation, is implementation of the social care. And the social care reform, if you talk to Maud, she'll be saying this is one of the biggest social care reform. So the social care reform itself, and we know that LGA, it's not me, LGA, and has published that right now is underfunded. So the challenge is not to take into account the demographic changes which is happening, but the social care reform as well, if it's not properly funded, will have an impact on local government budget. So social care is an area, 70% of the council budget goes into social care, and any demographic pressures or like things like inflation or slowdown economy will have impact on the budget. And it's not easy to forecast. It's very difficult. It's an area where we constantly monitor, but so far you will see that the social care and children budget are more or less under control, because we've done a good work on those, putting additional resources. But right now with slowing our economy, that will still be a challenge. And implementation of the social care reform, that is going to be one of the biggest challenge. And you will see in 23-24 budget, we'll be talking about those challenges and whatever funding gap in implementation of social care reform.
Chair, just a couple of questions, and then I want to perhaps just probe something else. In page 19, we're talking about population well-being and so on down there. To what extent has our budget and budget position been affected by refugees within our borough?
I think in terms of refugees, Councillor, when we talk about, we've got the first was Afghan refugees and Ukraine. In terms of the refugees, the council gets funding from central government. So far in terms of refugees, the funding is adequate. What is more important is what will happen long term. Yeah, so Luton is a small area. There's not much spec in terms of building more properties. So the council officers are writing and in constant discussion with central government and Home Office to say, okay, yeah, we can sustain a level of expenditure which is partly funded, or right now it's adequately funded from central government. The long-term prospect, Luton is saying, we as a council, we can't carry on with this level of service, i.e. accommodate with schools and everything. But just coming back to your point is whether those impact of those refugees in the budget is adequately funded from central government right now.
If I can point you then to page 23, and particularly item 7, it seems to me that we have been failing to make the savings that we have been forecasting now, not just for this quarter, but for almost forever, it seems. And here in section 7, it seems to me you're asking the service managers within our council to do something that's just not going to be possible without very dramatic cuts in services. I think you're asking in paragraph 7 for something that's just going to make the gap between reality and what's in the budget even bigger.
I think I understand the point you're making, Councillor. My response will be, as a council, you have to prepare a balanced budget. So the starting point of this recovery plan is we have to ensure that we aim towards delivering a balanced budget. So this is a recovery measures. Each area might have a different pressure. So you're absolutely right, the point you're making. But these recovery measures is with the aim to end up having a balanced budget. So there will be areas where we'll have to, when these recovery plans are being developed, there's several meetings. There's meeting taking place tomorrow. There's that chief exec is coming back. He's on holiday, so when he's coming back, a recovery plan should be already in place. And here we are working on options. At the end of the day, decision is made by the council. So we have to bring those options, go through those options, discuss, and see how we can have a recovery plan. But I think the point you're making, is it going to be a challenge? Yes. Yes. If you prepare a budget in February and in May, you've got inflation, pay inflation 4 million plus price inflation 4 million, 8 million, how can you? So, but we have to start with, we have to look quite hard in all our expenditure and all our income as well, because we'll see whether we can generate. We look at our capital program, we look at the way we are procuring, we look at our contract, whether the scope of the contract. So in this unprecedented time, we have to look at every area, how we can make savings or increase income or increase the scope of what we are, sort of the services, whether we can provide the same service but slightly in different way. It's yeah, you can read on the papers, you can read on the magazine. It's a challenge. IFS is saying it is a challenge. Government will have to fund. If government is not going to fund, then council are left, because you can't go back and say now inflation is 10%. We are going to increase council tax, whatever, because that's not what council are going to do. But it is going to be a challenge. Yes, it is going to be a challenge. So these measures are, we come up with a plan, we have to draw a detailed plan, and you have to have an implementation plan how to recover. I keep on saying it's going to be a challenge. Yes, it's going to be a challenge. If I say if it was that easy, then we wouldn't have been on the papers everywhere. Inflation is everybody's. Yeah, it's not everybody's personal budget. It's people are struggling. So council is no different from anybody's personal budget. You've got a fixed income, but if cost is going up, you've got to, yeah. So yeah, we
just one more then in that case. A lot of the things that I've seen here, and to some extent some of the points we're making on all of the cost recovery plan and so on, we've got huge amounts of money that we're spending on things like the expansion of 1 million passengers a year on the government instigated inquiry. We've got the huge expenditure on the DCO. Can't we start delaying some of those? Can't we start putting off some of those? Can't we start looking at some of these huge budget items that seem to be protected somehow? And we're talking about here giving service managers an impossible set of tasks to do. And yet we've got things like the DCO and the other funding on the million passengers, which are costing us absolute shed loads of money. Can't we try and attack those rather than forcing our operational managers to actually try and do something which is not going to be possible? I'm sorry, it looks to me as if from this budget, we're going to go from bad to worse, and we're going to have most of our operational managers worrying so much about budget that they haven't got the time to do their job.
I think the answer to your question, Councillor, is a fair question. We are going to look at every area of the budget, including our wholly owned subsidiaries as well. Coming to the point about the £1 million on the inquiry, that is a statutory requirement for the planning authority to look at any inquiry. No?
No, it's not £1 million, Dev.
It's half a million.
It's 1 million passengers. Yeah, and it's no. In terms of the cost to the planners to actually, we're obviously having to kind of go to a public inquiry on that, because that's been called in by the Secretary of State. I think we put some money from contingency, about just over £500,000 for us to be able to kind of go through that process. So actually, that's unfortunate that the government have forced us down that road. That's not a Luton Borough Council issue, but you're quite right. It's public money that we're having to spend, but we've taken that out of contingency, haven't we, Deb, as one-off? Yeah, we did set aside from last year outturn, and there's £500,000. I think it's in the report somewhere. But as I said, is a law application, but as a planning authority,
we've got to yeah. So it won't have impact on this year's budget. Coming back to the DCO, DCO is a LAL application, and DCO is something which the council agreed 4 or 5 years ago in terms of the future of the airport. So we were getting close to the 18 million passengers, and the only way is the runway has got 32 million capacity. And that was the planning strategy of the council, because we've got an airport and we've got to make sure there's a future plan in order to make sure those airlines have got their, like EasyJet has got their head office here. The DCO is a loan which we provide to LAL, so it's not like revenue budget which we're providing to LAL. The upside of the loan when we provide to LAL, we make a premium on that interest. So if you borrow at X, we add the premium in order to charge LAL. So that you will see even we are not including dividend in our budget, there is 26 million coming from LAL in the council budget, and that provides a lot of key services. And part of that 26 million in the interest we're generating on the loan, which we provided to LAL, the DCO. So that's not revenue. On the contrary, the loan we provided to LAL is contributing towards the council budget in terms of interest. But the point you made, yeah, we have to look at every area, and that's what we said in the capital program we look at. Yeah, so every area will have. It's not easy. Just 8 million in 2 years from pay award. Yeah, it's not easy. We're going to look every area, councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things I want to say, if I may. The first thing, the report that also says about the 120 million taken out during austerity, and we know who done austerity. Okay, so we know who gave us austerity. It was the Tories and the Lib Dems. They could have chosen a different ideology, but they chose not to. Then we heard tonight also about the Lib Dems not supporting the budget. And that's right, they didn't. But the budget was putting certain money back into services at that time, into highways, into street cleansing, and that's what they didn't support. Now, since then, we were making a recovery on the budget. We are now where we are because of what is happening in the UK and all around the world in relation to inflation, energy costs and prices and what's going up there. And it's a UK council issue, not just Luton Borough Council. So I'm concerned what I'm hearing here tonight. You know, there's good scrutiny, and that's great. And I love to hear the scrutiny. But let's get this right. You know, we're in a position now, we're in recovery, and now something's just hit us again, just after coming out of the pandemic, when we're recovering from that, and we've been hit again with this. Okay, and that's why where we are with this budget. If we weren't hit with that, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about recovery. We wouldn't be sitting here talking about that. Just a couple of more things I'd like to say, if I may, because I'm a bit concerned about language again. I'm going to ask Deb, if he may, to talk about secured and unsecured loan at the airport, and is our loan safe? Thank you.
I can respond to that. We don't go into the specific LAL. But the legal definition is a secured loan. We've got a debenture agreement, which is signed by LAL. The loan has been registered with Company House as a secured loan on the assets of LAL. Now, I think we had this discussion, but the LAL is a subsidiary company, so it's that. But the legal definition in the debenture agreement is a secured loan on LAL assets. So when we say secured, unsecured, is secured on LAL assets, and it's registered with Company House as a secured loan. So that will be my legal response to whether it's secured or not secured. Now, that's what we have.
Thank you. I hope that clears that situation up. You know, the money is secured on the airport. And I think just from your point, Councillor, what you said about the budget, this is not the budget. It's an outturn for Court 1. We must make that quite clear as well. It's a forecast for Court 1. It's not the budget that we're looking at today. You know, I just want to get these things right because they matter. Words matter and language matters. I just want to get them right. Thank you.
Right. Before we get down to summing up where we are, I think it's worth pointing out that when you take out a mortgage to buy a house from the Nationwide Building Society, The Nationwide Building Society doesn't secure that loan by putting a charge on its office in George Street. It secures that loan by putting a charge on the house that you're buying, which they do not own. You do. The £550 million worth of loans to the airport are secured on assets which the council already owns by virtue of its ownership of the company. That is an unsecured loan in anybody's language. Now, to move on to where we really ought to be, which is talk about this. This is the sloppiest and most unrealistic budget, this year's budget, that I've experienced in all my years on the council. We said so in February at the Budget Council meeting. We challenged many of the assumptions being made at that time. It's a political budget. The decisions were made by politicians, and politicians should answer for them. And to that extent, I'm seriously disappointed in Councillor Roche's attitude in sitting there and allowing an officer to take the flak. That really is not reasonable. I wish to make a formal move, please. I move two things. Number one, that the officers be thanked for a really thorough report, an informative report. And two, that the executive be advised that it is the view of the Scrutiny Finance Review Group that budgets should not only be balanced, but should be realistic and achievable.
Yeah, can I just say, for many years I was part of the scrutiny, but then I did a little while now. I thought scrutinizing a council's budget or anything, political speech is generally made at the council chamber, at the full council. Scrutiny ought to be scrutinizing and challenging what the process of in terms of holding the executive to account. And I am very surprised that we are making as if this is a full council chamber and we're all making speeches on that. I do agree with the first part of the proposal. I do agree. We thank the officers for putting a very scrupulous, as far as they are concerned, a brilliant, what they have done, tried to put the budget together. I also like to add to thank them, all the council officers, despite the shortages of staff in all parts of the council, they are providing services to the public, even some of them doing more than 2 or 3 jobs. So I think we are very grateful for that. In terms of sending it to the executive in the sloppy and all that sort of language, I could not support. So I would support the first part of it, but I cannot support the second part of it, because I think that the officers have done their best to put a budget that they think will not, and this is most important for every member, that we do not deprive vulnerable people of Luton, do not have anybody else supporting their services other than the local authority, be that may children, adults. So we owe it to the people of Luton to give them the best service that we can, despite the financial difficulties that the local authority is facing. So I am saying that, we would thank the officers, but the second part, I couldn't support it. And I think we are really trying to do a budget which is really, in difficult circumstances, Chair, we are trying to do our best to provide the services that we can, despite the cuts of these previous governments, in which some part of that was the people sitting here were part of that government. So they have continued for 12 years and you yourself, Chair, now that we had a major cuts in the council's budget, but we're still trying to provide vital services. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Hussain says, I do support the first part of the proposal. But I'd like to thank you to the obviously, they've done very hard work. They prepared such a difficult budget at such a difficult time, the best possible they could. But the second part, as you're aware, as we're all aware of, in past 12 odd years, the central government has taken almost 160 million out of our budget. So in this difficult time after the COVID, in the crisis of the living cost, I think this is the best possible budget that we could do. So I don't support the second part of the proposal. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously that's carried. In that case, all I do is reiterate the thank you from Councillor Franks for your services, for answering the questions to the best of your ability and giving a good account. We're all in a very difficult position with fuel prices like gas going up tenfold compared with last year. It makes budgeting almost impossible, but I think you've done a very good job, and you got as close as possible to a good budget. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, councillors, for the kind words. I will take it
Right.
to the officers.
Now we come to item 10. Over to you, Deb, again.
Okay, so this report on page 38 is to do with the investigation update and NATI's final report. So I think members would recall I've been giving a brief, but my brief was very, very limited because I couldn't say quite a lot because there was an ongoing investigation. So I did promise once the investigation is practically complete, which is, and when we receive the final report and we get clearance from all the stakeholders, we'll bring the full report. So what you have in front of you, the full NATIS report. So the background is, as just to mention, Chair, SEMLEP is one of the members of LEP, the Local Enterprise Partnership, and SEMLEP is Southeast England local and Southeast England and Midland Local Enterprise Partnership. We, as the council, are part of SEMLEP, but we also have a role of accountable body role. The accountable body role, which I act as Section 151 officer for SEMLEP, is to make sure the money comes from central government. We hold this on behalf of central government and SEMLEP, and when SEMLEP, those projects are approved and the grant conditions are met, and we get instruction from SEMLEP to release those funding because those grant conditions are met, we check those and we release those funds. And this case was to Mark Rutherford School. The investigation had been going on for quite a long time, and it was investigated by National Investigation Service, which is NATIS, and they've issued the report which is attached to this. And this report, in my report, I'm going to just point out some of the main point here. I think if you look at paragraph 7, what it says here, the report confirmed that the user account of SEMLEP employee was illegally compromised by a criminal entity, and then that entity used that account and to contact the Luton Council to advise for a change in bank account, and that's how it's the bank account was the money was transferred. I think in good faith, and we generally believed it belonged to the school, which turn out to belong to criminal. The Nactus report is contained in paragraph appendix 1. I think what is important here is on paragraph 11, that between 11th and 17th of March, there was number of emails was sent between each council officer's genuine email account and the emails account of various people at SEMLEP. So there were exchange of emails from that account which was compromised, so between SEMLEP and council officers. But paragraph 12 as well, just highlight, it was not just email coming from that officer account which was compromised, but on top of that, there were additional SEMLEP officers' email accounts were being spoofed and appeared as CERNEP. So if you look at the last line on paragraph 12, if you look from a distance, it looked like SEMLEP, but in fact it's not SEMLEP, it's CERNLEP, S-E-R-N. So there was accounts created by those criminals in domain in another jurisdiction, and those, when you look at the name and you have an email small characters, it looks like those accounts were at least from SEMLEP. So the report goes in very much detail, but what I would suggest here is there was some talk and there was some reports that the council lost this amount, but I think the report made it clear it was both were victim for these highly organized, sophisticated criminals. So it's not some back mandate. This is highly organized and sophisticated, and the report talks about money laundering and everything. So the report is very detailed. It has been produced. Just we've redacted the officer's name, and that's from legal advice. I think the stage of investigation is practically complete, but it will ongoing because there was other things. It's somebody who is on Natis list, and if they turn up at their airport or wherever, then Natis will investigate further. There has been recommendation done in the report, and we've already implemented. Those have already been implemented quite a while ago. So both SEMLEP and LBC have done implementation and tightened further the control. In terms of financial recovery, I think it has been made clear on paragraph 24 that Luton has no liability to compensate for 1.1 million, and the loss was as a result of the compromise of SEMLEP IT system. Now, we've already agreed with SEMLEP, and the money was paid from one of the growth fund. So this has already been agreed. There's various statements here. You will see as appendices issued jointly. And those statement is, if you look at some of the comments by Robin, our chief exec, and clarify some of the things which you have seen in the local papers for a long time, and this has been clarified now. This was not something which was a council system was compromised. And on that, Chair, I'm quite happy to go in the detailed report, but it's very technical and it's very lengthy. But I think the report in front of you summarizes some of the main point which I've just made. And the statement has been issued. There is a statement which you can see attached, and the statement comes from the council, and it has been discussed with SEMLEP as well. So I'm quite happy to take any questions, Chair. But right now, I said you've got the full report, and the investigation is practically closed.
Thank you very much, Deb. Yes, and David.
Thank you, Chair. The whole thing has obviously clearly been set up by some very sophisticated international organisations. But that's clear. It does highlight that certain practices within both SEMLEP and LBC were probably not as robust as they needed to be, and will clearly need to be updated to that. But I've got a couple of questions and points. I find it incredible that SEMLEP notified the police on the 6th of March, but we weren't told till the 17th of April. What lack of communication? you know, we as an authority held that money to be transferred to the school, Mark Rutherford School. Yet it took over a month, in fact, before we were advised that it hadn't arrived. Who did we have any indication, or was it just Sem that didn't bother to tell us until nearly a month, over a month later, that the money had disappeared?
I can answer that. So, I think when we make a transfer, there's a rigorous process we go through. In fact, in the council, there's three staff involved. The one who is getting the instruction, then there's somebody checking, and then somebody releasing the payment. So there's three staff at the council get involved in that. Why there was a delay in that response? The main reason, councillor, is the staff who normally monitors those payments which went to the schools allegedly, was off. It was off for I think it was because of COVID. And the reason it is a report says, we were advised by the bank. So the bank informed us there is something which we need to look at, because as part of the monitoring, they spotted an unusual transaction in somebody's account. So when the bank advised us, straight away you will see, we look at it to say, hang on, but we've paid that. We look at the bank details, we look at the name of the school, everything on that. And then we've informed our shared anti-fraud service to look at it, say, look, hang on, what's going on here? So when they looked at it, and straight away they say, okay, we've got to inform the school and the police. So that's what we did. So between the date when the payment was made and the date we were advised by the bank, we'll say we are advised by Lloyds Bank in paragraph 18. Our expectation, we didn't hear from the school, so we said the transfer has been made, the school has received the money. And those who are monitoring those, that the stuff was off for a long period. I think it was because of COVID. So it's a bit unfortunate, is everything fall as if, and those are the things which created, But once we got the information from Lloyds on the 17th, straight away, we informed our shared anti-fraud service.
And it's the fact that it says that Semlep actually informed the police on the 6th of March. In paragraph 8.
I think what it says here, the misappropriation was on 6th of March, and Semlep immediately reported. So when we informed Semlep on 16th, 17th of April, around that time, when we look at it, then Semlep reported to the police.
Sorry, did I misread that paragraph?
Yeah.
If that's what I've misread it, that I read it that Semlep knew on the 6th of March and informed the police, and we didn't find out till the 17th of April. I apologise, then that I've misread that.
So it says on 20th of April, Luton notified Semlep. So we've got that from Lloyds on 17th.
Yeah.
Just quickly, shared anti-fraud service did a quick review and to say, okay, what's going on here? Straight away, and they said, hang on, it's a cyber thing. We informed Semlep on the 20th of April, and Semlep informed the police straight away. Because since it was, it looked like the email was compromised, we informed the Semlep for them to immediately. So the misappropriation was on 6th of March. Between 6th of March and 17th, that's where the bank informed us. We didn't have any correspondence to say that the school didn't receive that money.
No, so the school, for a start, you'd have thought would have been in touch with somebody. But next question, especially with this false emails that were around, and it's quite easy to misread that. And busy people do misread things. We've had in my CPS department a number of solicitors' secure email addresses hacked and used to do phishing exercises. So we now have on every external email a big chunky notice that says, be aware, this is an email from an external source. Please check that it is. Is that something that we can now we should be putting in place? Every email that comes into the council from an external source should have a warning notice that it's come from an external source and its veracity should be checked before any action is taken.
I think that the answer to your question is happening now. So the trust, every time we receive an email, there's a big, this is the email, which is, yeah. So I think
I'll read you what it says. So I've got an external email. It says, caution, this email came from an external source. Only open links and attachments you are expecting. So that's the kind of the wording on all our external emails coming in.
What we have, but an extension to that, I would have thought, was a change of banking details would not necessarily have been something that would have been expected. And it should have perhaps flagged up to the recipient that perhaps a phone call to the person who sent the email just to check that the bank changes were correct might have been ideal. So is there some new training that might be available, put forward to not to click on links or anything, but if it's something that you're not expecting, such as a change of banking details, that a verbal communication to check that the email you've received is actually genuine.
So the answer to your question, the first point you've made is when the email comes from an external, the system will check it. Because the account was hacked, the email which was coming from that account. So even if you have that system correctly says this email, it will read the person email. The other two emails which were copied to other officers, those were CERNLAB. So the first email came from CERNLAB. That's why the account was compromised. And then the other two emails were CERNLAB. So when you look at it as free, it looks like free CERNLAB email, but one was genuine coming from CERNLAB. The other two was spoof account, which was CERNLAB. So it just, yeah. So the point you made about checking, yes, we at that time we had the system to ring and to make sure those check. But what was happening at that time, those control was done by CERNLAB. So CERNLAB was ringing because we didn't have direct access to those like the school. So they were supposed to go and check and then make sure they ring and they confirm. So when we had that discussion between the council and CERNLAB, we did request to go and ring and to check and to provide evidence as well on the letter that those accounts, yeah. So those were done at that level. And when the email came from that, all the confirmation were coming from that compromised account to the officers to say, yes, we've contacted the schools, we've checked that the bank detail has been changed, and here's a letterhead which confirmed that those have been checked. And in those emails as well, there were other things which obviously were only known to those officers, the meeting which took place and everything. So the way it was done, it was look absolutely genuine and saying, yes, we've rang them, we've confirmed and everything. And the point you're making, yeah, but now we've tightened is not only they will ring and check, we will ring them and check as well. So we've heightened and we have not only we had 3 staff, now we got 4 staff, 4 layers of staff involved in any payment we are making now. So yeah, we have that point of ringing, but it was sort of, that was done at that level where they had to ring and confirm. And they, from that email came, yes, we rang, we confirmed, here's the details, here's the evidence as well. And that was the point where, yeah, we were just victim of that criminal.
Question. Page 41. It says, all the recommendations for Semlet and Luton in the report have been completed, and Semlet and all Semlet staff now have annual training on cyber security. I've been in the civil service since 2009. I've had mandatory cyber security training every year since then. This seems to have been something that should have been picked up from Semlet much earlier. You know, cyber security has always been an issue. And the more we do things digitally and electronically, the more security minded we need to be. To the point that if I don't complete my annual security training within the specified period, all my work accounts are frozen. So I don't have an option, you know, you don't just have an option that, I'll do it later. If you don't do it within the period, and I think you get a month in which you are to log on, do your cybersecurity, prove that you've done it, send the certificate. All my work emails, logging on to the work system, that will all get frozen, and it can take days to unlock it. I just find it difficult that a organisation like Semlet should have known about cybersecurity and done things on cybersecurity far quicker and far more urgently than waiting till something like this happens and then, oh well, the horse is bolted, but we'll lock the door now. It just seems to me that that's, and I think they've been trying to lay the blame on LBC for their own shortcomings. And I think it's not really a great advert for Semlet as an organisation, that the first thing they worry about, first time they think about getting annual cybersecurity training in is after they have £1 million nicked by people we will probably never ever find, because they're probably sitting in a nice little room somewhere in Indonesia or Australia or anywhere in the world. And it just worries me that they are an organisation responsible for quite a lot of public money, and their cyber security training has only just been implemented.
I take note. I can relay this message to Semlet. I have the question to answer for Semlet.
Yeah, thank you, John. Just a couple of quick points. I'm not going to detain you very long here. Paragraph 17 talks about international police cooperation. I think we've got loads and loads and loads of evidence which tells us that international police cooperation has been seriously damaged by our leaving the European Union. we're fortunate that it still exists at all. But there you go. That's just another one of the benefits of Brexit, isn't it? What I really wanted to say is I honestly think that Dev and his team should be congratulated for producing a report which really effectively pulls out the key points of the investigation report. And I thank you for that, because it made the whole thing a lot clearer for me. There are a couple of points really that it would be worth considering. Number one, before money is released, the release ought to be authorised not just by one email, but by several emails, and followed up by a telephone conversation between people who actually know each other. And the other was that it makes it clear, the two other things are made very clear. I mean, one is that it was a problem with SEMLEP's systems being cloned, or whatever the appropriate word is, that caused it, and that in spite of the initial publicity, Luton Council was pretty blameless in all of this. And the other point is that what I didn't understand until I read through this in much more detail is that there are suspects, and that there is a hope that at some time in the future, some of them may be brought to justice, and that the investigating authority hasn't given up on that case. That's a source of some encouragement to me. Yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, so Chair, absolutely, Councillor Frank. The first point you made, yes, is we've tightened and phone call and everything. And yeah, you're right, that this has not, the case is not formally closed. So if any additional evidence or somebody will appear on the radar, it's always on the radar. So, but thanks for your kind word and really appreciate it. Thank you.
Questions or queries? I would just like to reiterate what David said, that it's a really very comprehensive report. It delves deeper into it. And of course, the original kind of scare stories was that it was all Luton's fault. And this really shows it was nothing to do with Luton. Luton went through all the procedures which it should have done and did everything in good faith. And so it's nice to have a report which makes us blameless. Thank you very much, Deb. All right. Item 11, the work programme.
Members have the work programme before them on page 63. And as members are aware, there's an additional meeting of the Finance Review Group on 24th of August for the stage outline business case. And the training for that will be taking place virtually via Teams on Monday. So is there anything that anyone would like to add or change on the work programme? No? Okay then.
Everybody seems to be happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, that brings us to the second part of the meeting, where I say the Local Government Act of 1972, Part 5A, to consider whether to pass a resolution under Section 100A bracketed for the Local Government Act of 72 to exclude the public from the meeting during the consideration of any item listed above, which is likely that if members of the public were present during those items that were to be disclosed to them, of exempt information falling within the paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act of 72. Everybody in favour?